Okay, well, thank you. Good morning, everyone, for joining us for the final day of the new director training. We will have Beth Ponder presenting on professional development, and we will have Blanca Saldivar from our team that will be presenting on some basic teams information. Now, just a reminder, the new director training, we've kept it not basic so much, but pretty high level for the most part, because we know that there's a pretty diverse group that's participating. Some people have been in AEL for some time. Some people are new to the team. So we just wanted to provide a little bit of everything in the different areas that we work in. For those of you who are interested in continued support, we will be offering that starting sometime after July 4th. We're going to put together a series of follow-up support meetings, which will focus on specific topics, some of which that have been covered through the new director training. So if you could please fill out the survey and let us know what you're interested in, we can put that together. And then also we'll be going over the surveys that are provided after these trainings to see, what we need to improve. And also, again, if there's additional information we need to be providing. So thank you very much for joining us. It's been a good amount of time that you've invested, and I hope it's been worthwhile for you, for anyone that's been part of all 6 trainings. I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Beth Ponder so she can get started. So thank you so much, Beth, for joining us and presenting today's material on professional development.
Thank you, Elena. Welcome, everyone. Good morning. It's so good to see you. We do have a diverse group kind of looking at who's here. So I'm going to turn on my camera and say good morning. For bandwidth purposes, I'll go ahead and stop the camera. So we're going to start off the morning today, spending about an hour kind of looking at professional development and the professional development requirements. Some of you, this is going to be not new information. Some of you, it will be, or it will be a reinforcement of what you already know. So we're going to dig in here for about an hour and see how far we can get into the presentation, and then we'll take a break, okay? So, professional development, let's go ahead and get started. And again, my name is Beth Ponder. I'm the Director of Professional Development at the Texas Center for the Advancement of Literacy and Learning, or TCAL, at Texas A&M University. So what we'd like to get done in our time together today is to be able to reference the PD rules, guidance, and policies, understand and apply PD tracking procedures and teams data entry, how to request professional development, how to utilize the PD portal and various assistant resources. And if we get time, I'm not sure we're going to get that far, talk about the discussion lists that are supported by TCAL and the library resources that are available on our website. So just a little bit about Train PD at TCAL. We are, as I mentioned, housed at Texas A&M University. We have been the State Adult Literacy Resource Center for Texas since 1989. So we've been around for a while. We are currently the statewide AEL Professional Development and Resource Center, and we just were awarded a continuation of that grant. So starting June 1, we started a new grant cycle as your PD center. We are funded by the Texas Workforce Commission via grant, and we are the hub for the Adult Education and Literacy Training Resource and Innovation Network. So if anybody ever wondered what Train PD stood for, that's what that stands for. And on the picture there, you see the front of Milner Hall, which is the building we're housed in at Texas A&M. And as of June 1st, we've all started coming back into that office. So we are again working from there. So we're going to talk first about definitions of PD coordinator and PD specialist, and then look at those staff qualifications and what are those qualifications look like. And those qualifications come directly from the Texas Annotated Code 805.21. So if you don't know that code, you will know it well before this is all over. All right. So in the proposal that each of the individual grantees received, this is what's laid out as far as professional development and what does a PD event mean. It is defined as learning activities for instructors and staff of AEL programs that participate in programs and services. Refers to the acquisition of skills and knowledge for career advancement and encompasses all types of facilitated learning opportunities, including workshops, conferences, and informal learning opportunities. A PD event provides content that supports learning outcomes through presentations, demonstrations, and or discussion of new ideas, information, knowledge, materials, research finding, best practices. So if you're ever wondering, does this count as PD or how do I define PD? You can go straight to your grant proposal and this is what you will see. Just a word about technical assistance and kind of what's the difference between technical assistance and professional development. So technical assistance really is about policies and monitoring of grant deliverables. And that is work that will be done by your TWC program specialist. And we'll talk a little bit about PD specialists and what their role is in just a few minutes. Each grantee, as written in their RFP, is required to have someone assigned at least 20% to fill the role of a PD coordinator. And that role should not be filled by the director. It should be somebody else on your staff. Again, 20% of their time should be designated as a professional development coordinator for your program. And that person serves as the point of contact between TWC and the PD Center. They collaborate with the PD specialist, which is someone that works for us here at TCAL. That individual coordinates planning, implementation, and documentation of PD activities. And kind of the take on professional development is that it should always be part of the continuous improvement model for your program and not just something you're going to check off that people have done. The PD coordinator identifies staff who are behind on their PD or have specific professional development that they need targeted by their job role. And the PD coordinator should attend monthly webinars that are hosted by TCAL. So what's the difference between a PD coordinator and a PD specialist? So the PD specialist is hired by TCAL and they have a caseload. So they have a number of grantees that are assigned individually to that particular professional development specialist. They work in coordination with the local PD coordinator, the program director, and TWC. And part of their role is to look at data, look at Teams data, LMCI data, anything else that might help identify areas of growth or support that might be helped by targeted professional development. And that PD specialist is in regular contact with your local PD coordinator. So it's a continuous relationship throughout the year. So this slide just kind of compares those two roles, the PD specialist and the PD coordinator. Again, the specialist is employed by Train PD at TCAL. They have assigned programs, support to the local program, collaboration, and they work with you on your PD plan for the program year. We'll talk a little bit more about the PD plan here in just a moment. And the PD coordinator is, again, employed by the AE program, coordinates activities, is the point of contact for PD with both TWC and Train PD at TCAL, collaborates with the PD specialist, and should be part of your PD plan team. Thank you for Tracy, for putting the AEL guide in the chat. As we kind of go through, we're talking about several different pieces of policy that have informed this PowerPoint and that we kind of have to keep in mind as we're thinking about what is the required professional development for my team. So part of that is a deliverable that's required as part of your RFP. And that's 10.1.2, which is your PD plan. And you will get a template every year to complete your PD plan, and it is due directly to the Texas Workforce Commission. So the process that is followed to help programs with a PD plan is your assigned professional development specialist will help you and work with you on completing that plan. They'll, again, look at your data, look at your goals. They will conduct a site visit. The site visit might be in person or it might be virtual. Obviously, this last year, we have not done face-to-face site visits, but We try and get at least one face-to-face site visit with each program every year. Your PD specialist that is employed by TCAL will provide you with some recommendations based on what they see in the data, and they'll collaborate with you throughout the entire process to create that plan. And then once you all have completed the plan, then there'll be a specific due date, and then that will have to be turned into the Texas Workforce Commission. And that kind of helps outline your professional development needs and kind of your professional development goals over the course of the next year. And then kind of as a follow-up to that plan is a separate form, which is an ad hoc PD plan follow-up. Usually happens about 6 months into the program. I think we've been doing it about April every year. And again, part of what that is looking at, okay, what was our goals? What was our plan? And where did we get? How far did we get with that? Again, your professional development specialist will work directly with your PD coordinator to kind of look at where you are and what you might need to do. The form, again, will have a specific due date, and you as the grantee will be required to turn it into the Texas Workforce Commission, again, with support from your PD specialist. So I'm going to pause for a minute. This is kind of the PD requirements is kind of our next section. So we kind of went through there what some of the deliverables are and the role of the PD coordinator and the PD specialist. So any questions about that before I move on to the qualifications? Okay, I'll go ahead and jump in. All right, so we're going to jump into required professional development. And again, this is outlined in the Texas Annotated Code 805.21, and Tracy has put that link in the chat. So as far as administrative leadership for your local program, there are requirements for the amount of professional development that you need to complete within the fiscal year, starting July 1 through the end of June. So for directors and supervisors, they are required to have at least 15 hours of professional development throughout the program year. There's no specific content that is required for supervisors, but 15 hours. If that individual was hired on or after January 1st, that is cut in half. So on or after January 1, that requirement is 7.5 hours. Instructional staff, it gets a little bit more complicated. They also are required to have 15 hours during the course of the fiscal year, but there are some specific content areas that are required for them. They have to have 3 hours that are designated as principles of adult learning. They have to have 6 hours that's considered literacy instruction, and then 6 hours that are at the discretion of the program. And we'll talk a little bit more about the definition of principles of adult learning and literacy instruction in just a minute. So if someone coming into your program as an instructional staff person is new to adult education, at least 6 hours need to be completed within 30 days. All right, so once you've assigned them a class and they've started teaching, they have 30 days to get at least 6 hours, 3 needing to be PAL and 3 needing to be literacy instruction. Again, as with a supervisor, if they are hired on or after January 1st, they only need 7.5 hours of professional development before the end of the fiscal year, but they need 3 hours of PAL, 3 hours of lit, and then 1.5 hours can be at the program discretion.
Beth, I have a question, and this is a question I received from a PD coordinator. I think it's a good question. They hired a new staff person at the beginning of June, and they were asking me if the person still had to get their 7.5 hours in of PD. And that's a good question. What say you?
Way to put me on the spot, Miss Tracy.
Well, I knew the answer. I mean, I answered the question.
Technically, yes, that's within 30 days. So that's 7.5 hours within 30 days of starting instruction. Okay. There are, and we'll talk about that a little bit in a moment, there is a possibility of getting an exemption, but that would have to be, there's a form that has to be completed from that, and it would have to be approved by the Texas Workforce Commission AEL staff. That's not something that Train PD at T-Call can do to grant an exception. But if it's June 1, you still got 30 days, and that's as written in the policy, 30 days to complete that 7.5 hours.
So now we do have a question. I may have opened up a box of worms here, whatever that saying is. Marie says, what if their time covers June 14th to July 16th?
Meaning they were hired on June 14th. Marie, feel free to unmute.
Yes, if they start working like today and then they stop working in the middle of July, do they have to do the 7.5 for this year and the 15 for next year?
I think that would be a really good example of when an exception might want to be granted. But, I'd have to, somebody from TWC would have to approve that. But yeah, I mean, I could see it being super difficult to get that done in that short period of time. But part of the PD requirements that we have to keep in mind is that part of the PD requirements, not having hours could mean not getting hired for the next fiscal year. So that's super important. If you don't have the required hours, you can't be hired. So if it's somebody that's running over a fiscal year, who's only got 2 weeks, that kind of thing, an exemption would probably be where I would go with that.
Now, Anna is asking, so they would have to turn around and do more in July, right, to meet the new program year requirements. And I'm assuming, Anna, that person would continue working in the next program year.
Yeah. So, yeah, Anna, it resets July 1. Mm-hmm. So that's the beginning of the program fiscal year. So everybody's hours go back to zero as far as professional development, goes back to zero July 1. So then you start the process over again.
Thank you.
I'll kind of try and keep an eye on the chat. Okay, so others AEL staff, not leadership or not instructional staff, are required to have 3 hours of professional development. For test proctors and data entry staff, they again need that 3 hours, but the PD needs to be related to their primary duties. So depending on what their role is in your program, and you can help them determine that. Data entry staff, it should be Teams training. It might be customer service training. And again, other staff that are not instructional staff, that includes career navigators. There's no specific content area that's required. Okay, so now this we're getting a little in the weeds here, so hang with me, okay? So staff that fill more than one position. And so I've worked in adult education for a really long time, and I know that people wear lots of different hats. So if a staff person is filling more than one position funded by AEL, they're expected to complete the PD hours of the position that requires the most hours, and the PD content areas required for both positions. So for instance, if you have an instructor who also does data entry, they have to have 15 hours of professional development. And that PD needs to be in the content areas required for instructors, as well as 3 hours. So that would fall into that at the program discretion, the 3 hours that were related to data entry. And staff new to AEL or direct student service require at least 6 hours of PD within 30 days. Already kind of mentioned, but just to reiterate, those need to be 3 hours of PAL and 3 hours of LIT.
Okay, so we have another question. Marie's asking, we have someone that just started on June 14th as well, and she's working on her hours as well. But if needed, then an exemption can be submitted for her?
Yes, and I think I have a slide here in a few minutes, Maria, on the exemptions. So let me get there. If I don't answer your question, then we'll circle back, okay? So the Texas Annotated Code does get really weedy, and this is some very specifics about what the requirements are for professional development for your staff. So we did, at the time that the code first came out, worked with the Texas Workforce Commission AEL staff to kind of create this chart that helps me anyway, kind of look at all of these kind of moving pieces and lay it out. So the link that Tracy put into the chat will also take you, she put in specifically the chart. And so I find this really helpful, kind of helps me when I'm thinking about who all I have, whose requirements, what the requirements are for those individuals. So Just wanted to kind of, this is everything that we just talked about, but just in a graphically a different form. Okay, so we're going to skip over and start talking about tracking, how we track professional development. All right, so how we track it, how we put it into teams, what those classifications, what does PAL and LIT mean? What kind of documentation do you need to keep at the local level? And then those exemptions, Maria. All right, let's dig in. All right, so PD tracking. So we want to kind of look at what are your responsibilities at the local program level as far as PD tracking, and then what is our responsibility as trained PD at TCAL. So locally, it is up to you and your staff to track the PD for your staff. You need to have someone designated at your local program that's actually going in and attaching your staff to events in teams. There's a note here that before you add something into teams, you need to search for it so we don't have duplicate entries. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. Your staff at the local level can request PD from Train PD, and somebody at your team on your team needs to be able to add local trainings into teams. Okay, so somebody's going to have that level of access into teams. That might be your PD coordinator. It might be a data entry staff. That's going to be completely up to you. So Train PD at TCAL, our responsibility is we add into teams anything that we provide. So if you ask your PD specialist for a training, then we provide that for you, we will add it into teams. Now we'll add it into teams, but we're not going to attach your staff to it. Okay, you still need to have somebody designated to go in and attach your staff. And we also will add in anything that's like a statewide, national, and we'll talk a little bit more about those and kind of what that looks like. And this is just a highly recommend that you don't wait too long to go in and attach your staff to events in teams. We recommend at least monthly, at least within 2 weeks of the event, because we all know how that goes, right? We let it pile up and then it gets really difficult to keep up with. So recommend don't letting that slide too long. Get in there and get your staff attached. All right, so I mentioned that Train PD at TCAL does kind of the statewide, national. So we will enter all sessions for statewide events like the TALE Conference, the Literacy Texas Conference, the Literacy Texas Symposiums. And then we will also enter state or national conferences such as World Education, COABE. A number of your staff take advantage of the online links courses that are free, but we can't put all of that in. So the way we were doing that is we have a spreadsheet that we've created that your professional development coordinator will complete when you have staff that like attended COABE sessions. So we'll need you to fill that out completely, turn it into us, and it's actually usually Tracy or I that go ahead and put those into teams for you. And we don't just automatically put all of that in because, I mean, I don't know how many sessions were at COABE last year, hundreds and hundreds. So we don't have the staff capacity to just put in all of the COABE sessions into teams. So we ask you as the program directors and professional development coordinators to let us know what you need us to put in for your staff. And, you know, we ask that you not put in those sessions. Let us do that so then we don't have duplicate entries. So you guys are really responsible for what happens locally and not what happens at the national. Okay, I'm going to take a quick break for other questions before we talk about adding professional development into teams, the actual how we do it.
Okay, do you see the question from Carla? Do you want me to read it?
I see it. So what are trainings through essential education considered? So that would be considered national. So you can just send that the spreadsheet to us and we can enter that for you. Because if you're somebody from your team participated, somebody from somebody else's team probably did as well. And so that's where we end up starting to get duplicate entries. So yeah, I would consider that national. Anybody could participate in it. So we're happy to enter that for you.
And when in doubt, ask your PD specialist. Have your coordinator or you ask the PD specialist that works with your program, and they're happy to answer questions and help you and provide that form to you as needed.
No worry.
Oh.
No worry for Carla. You're fine. All right. So this again, we have a mixed group. Lots of people. This is going to be just old hat. But for anybody new, just kind of a step-by-step of attaching your staff to an event in Teams. We're not going to go through adding an event in Teams, although Tracy and I, or either one, would be happy to help you with that. But so when you go into Teams, this is on the right-hand side. You'll see all your reports and everything, your site staff, and there's a place for staff development. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on staff development. So once you click on staff development, then you're going to be able to search for a particular event. One tip that we give for searching for event is use keywords and not exact. What we found is both in the title field and the description field in Teams, there's a fairly significant character limit. So when we're putting things in to Teams, sometimes things have to get shortened a little bit in order to make it fit. So try keywords rather than exact titles. All right, so you'll have training provider. Training provider is another way to designate your search. You can search for something that TCAL did. You can search for something that's local to your program. And you're not going to be able to see everybody's program when you go in. You'll see your own local program, and then statewide and national. So once you find the event that you're looking for, click on the activity name, and then it'll pop up and look like this. And you can see the activity type, the description, the number of hours, and the date. And there at the bottom, you're going to have a couple of options. One is edit. Depending on what it is, you may or may not be able to edit it. And then there's add staff. And that's what we're looking for in this instance. We're going to add staff to this particular event. And so when you hit add staff, you're going to get a list of staff that are available to you. So you're not going to, again, see anybody else's staff. This is just the staff that you are designated in Teams to have access to. And then what you'll do is you'll just check the staff on your team that attended that particular event. And then bingo, you're done. Except step 2 here, add staff hours. All right. You can't just click them. You got to make sure you click that add staff hours button and then save. Make sure you save. Now, in this particular slide, you'll see hours attended here. So this is important in the instance that you had someone that wasn't able to attend the entirety of something. So they had an emergency and they had to leave early, but they attended for an hour of a 3-hour session. So rather than put in 3 hours here, this is where you would say, well, Jimmy Buffett was only able to attend for 1 hour. So this is where you would put that in. And then again, click save. So, okay, we've clicked save and bingo, we're done. So our staff have been added to that particular activity in Teams. Okie dokie. So PD classifications for local trainings. Again, these definitions are outlined in the Texas Annotated Code, and particularly the PAL. I hate continuing to use the word weedy, but it's pretty weedy. So PAL, a variety of research-based professional development topics that include instructional advising characteristics specific to adults that are concerned with a range of knowledge, skills, and abilities that adults bring to education. And so understand and use information, express themselves, act independently, managing a changing world effectively, meet goals and objectives related to career, family, and community. So I think one of the important pieces here for the PAL definition is the research base. And so as we're reviewing things and thinking about, does this qualify as PAL? Does this qualify as other? Does this qualify as literacy instruction? That research base is a really important piece, as well as that whole idea of characteristics specific to adults. As far as literacy, an individual's ability to read, write, and speak in English and to compute and solve problems at levels of proficiency necessary to function on the job, in the family, of the individual, and in society. So when we're looking at individual literacy, we're looking at specific content areas around reading, writing, and math instruction. So the other category, content areas that are at the discretion of the local program, but consist of content related to AEL's program purpose, which is to provide adults with sufficient basic education that enables them to be functional. So when we're talking about other or at the program discretion, it still needs to relate to that individual's job, right? So this just kind of lays out some bullets about that. Acquire basic education skills, participate in job training and retraining, obtain and retain employment, which of course under WIOA is a focus of our work, and continue their education to at least the level of secondary school completion or post-secondary. Okay, so required documentation. So what do I need to keep at the local program? If I get monitored and they come in and say, well, Peggy Sue says that she attended this and it shows in team. What kind of documentation do you need to keep at the local level? So a certificate of completion generated by the PD portal, a copy of a sign-in, sign-out sheet for a training event, an agenda that includes the number of PD hours, and any material that shows the relevance of that training to that individual staff person's job. As far as personnel documentation, an exemption form. If you've completed that exemption form for professional development, you need to keep that in the personnel file. So that's there, again, available for a monitor. And then proof of educational qualifications is, again, something that needs to be kept in the personnel file. And there is a caveat within the TAC code that you could waive some of the PD hours if someone took like a college level course that was specific to the content area that they were teaching. We didn't spend a lot of time talking about that, but that's a place where that we would need that would need to be documentation that was maintained within a personnel file. PD exemptions. Can the PDs required by the college to retain employment be counted as other? Yes, certainly, Tara. And it could be that it would fall under one of the other categories, depending on what the content area was. And if you had a specific question about something that one of your staff had to take, reach out to your PD specialist. If you think, well, that might fall under literacy, depending on what it is. If it's like very specific to, math instruction, it may well fall under literacy. So reach out to your PD specialist, or you're in a consortium, might reach out to Lupe and see if it might be a designation within that. Okay, the exemptions. So requests for exemptions for staff qualification requirements in individual cases must be submitted to the agency for approval with a justification outlining those extenuating circumstances, and shall be submitted and approved prior to an individual being placed in the position in question. All right, so you need to do that before you start. If they're not going to get their hours, you need to do it immediately. Get that paperwork in to your TWC program specialist. Okay.
Okay, so I have a question that was sent to me. I had a program PD coordinator ask me about a graduate level classes in adult education. How do we guide them, and how many hours to count as PAL or literacy or other? And there is no sign-in sheet, so how do we advise on that?
Well, okay, so no sign-in sheet. There should be, then you need to make sure there's some kind of certificate of completion. It could be a transcript, just some kind of documentation that that person participated and how many hours they participated in. Now, as far as, well, that's kind of a twofold question. Are you just wanting that to count as professional development, or are you wanting it to count via the code as exempting them from other professional development? So it's just a matter of documentation, okay? And because that is a grant requirement, if you have specific, I would start with your program specialist, TWC program specialist, because those kinds of things are part of your grant requirements.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Anything you want to add to that, Tracy?
No.
Okay. Well, feel free to jump in. Tracy and I are
Okay.
kind of tag teaming here. Okay. So check our time. All right. So we're going to talk about requesting professional development and kind of what counts as a tier 1 training and what counts as a tier 2 training. So this is, tier 1. So tier 1 topics include recruitment, intake, and orientation. All of the assessment trainings Goal setting, and we do have an online goal setting that's available through the PD portal, and career awareness. The way the RFPs are written is that tier 1 topics are required to be paid for at the local level. So those kinds of topics are things that you would pay for at the local program level. You can use local staff to do assessment training as long as they have completed the required training, participated in a TOT, or published the requirements to be a trainer for that particular assessment. And there are a lot of caveats there. We provide a lot of training of trainer opportunities so that you can have a local staff person that is qualified to go ahead and do assessment trainings for you. We do have it set so that if you wanted to do a local training but do registration through the portal, that can happen. And you just work with your PD specialist for that. So tier 2, tier 1 is kind of those basic things. So tier 2 topics, the way I kind of think about it, are a little bit higher level, and those things that really reinforce the work and help you do your job better. What are some things that Train PD can do to help your teachers be the best teachers they can be, or your administrators be the best administrators they can be? So some of those type of topics would include contextualized instruction, multi-level classroom management, career pathways, all of the content standards work that we're doing, persistence, and then anything that we specifically develop to meet the needs of your local program. And in that case, Train PD will pay for the training, we'll pay for the trainer, and in some cases, depending on what you need, we'll pay for content development. And again, as listed here, if you have a particular need that you've identified for your program, reach out to your PD specialist. If it's not something that we have, it might be something that we can create for you or pull together for you, but just know that we need lead time for that. And you also, the last bullet here is you can request a specific trainer. I saw, Billy Bob present at Taylor, and I thought they were great. Can you bring them in to present for our team? We will try to do that. It's not always possible depending on the schedule of the individual, but we'll certainly try to meet that need. Okay, so requesting a training. So questions to ask yourself before you request a training: is there a need for the training? And thinking about need, can you support the need for that training through local or statewide needs assessment data? And so that kind of goes back to when the PD specialists are making recommendations for PD for you and your program. One of the things that we need to do is we have to look at your data and say, is there a need that supports this, or does that data show a gap or a place where we might look to improve what we're doing? Is that training part of your plan? Is it a tier 1 or a tier 2 training? And once we've identified that, yes, this is a need, and yes, it's a tier 2, then that's when we complete this PD request form. And so this is it's not great because it's kind of a screenshot, but this is kind of what the form looks like. It's not kind of, it is what the form looks like to request professional development session for your program. And of course, at this point, we're doing both face-to-face or online. So we've certainly pivoted to do most of our face-to-face trainings virtually. Not everything correlates perfectly. I mean, I think we know that there's some training that really is just better face-to-face. So as your PD coordinator completes this form, it's really important that they complete it as fully as they can. So we need the name of the training. If you have a preferred trainer, this is where you'll put that. We need the actual dates and times. We need the description, the training contact and location. And this is super important when we're doing face-to-face training, because I know I have myself been on a community college campus driving around at 8 o'clock in the morning trying to figure out what building I'm supposed to be in. And so those specifics are really important. If we need to be in building G in room 102, this is where we need that information, okay? And training availability. And what that means is, so If you want that training only available to your local program, you need to let us know. But if you feel like you've got space and the neighboring program also might want to send some staff, well, and you're happy to allow them to come, this is where you let us know that. And then we'll make that availability happen on the back end. So the neighboring program can register as well as your staff. And then address for shipping. So this is really important when we're doing face-to-face trainings and we need to send handouts to you, that it's going somewhere. We have an actual physical location that we can mail things to, and that the person that's going to be receiving it knows what it's for. So it doesn't get put on a loading dock somewhere and the trainer can't locate the materials when they get there. And then once that's complete, then you send it to your PD specialist, and then we'll start the process of getting that all taken care of for you. So part of what the role of your PD coordinator is, and will continue to be, is to identify the needs for the program, but also ensure that the training is getting communicated out to the local program staff. You know, if you're a big consortium, your PD coordinator may be at the main office, but you may have satellite offices all across the city. So we need you all to get the word out to the instructors that this professional development event is happening. And we need to have at least 5 participants. If we can't hit the 5 participant mark, then we reserve the right to either open it up to a wider audience or to cancel the training. And I think that makes sense. You know, we have to pay a trainer to go. We have to pay for trainer travel. We want to be good stewards of the resources that have been awarded to us. And so we want to have at least 5 people there. Now, there could be an exception there if your program has a very specific issue that we're bringing a trainer in to address. Maybe it's something about teams or data entry. You know, it may be we have a smaller staff. That would be more targeted professional development technical assistance. So that's a little bit different. And so once we've gone through all that, we'll get it into the PD portal, and your PD specialist will let you know that it's available for registration in the portal. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes left. I'm going to take a quick pause here to see if there are any questions on that. And then we're going to just quickly run through some information about the professional development portal. And I've mentioned the portal several times. And of course, again, looking at our group, some of you are going to be real familiar with the portal. Tracy, did I miss anything while I was?
No, I'm not seeing anything.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll move forward and just let me know if anything comes up.
Okay, will do.
Okay, so what is the PD portal? The professional development portal is our learning management system. And when I say our, I mean adult education and literacy in the state of Texas. And we house professional development, online courses, webinar recordings, as well as registration for all of our events through the PD portal. So highlights include access to high quality PD, ability to complete PD at your own pace. So most of the online courses that are available through the PD portal are asynchronous. So an individual can go in and complete them at their own, in their bunny slippers at home in the evening, at their own place. Access to transcripts and certificates of completion. And I think that that's, for me, a really important piece of what the professional development portal does, is have one place where individual can go look at their transcript, print off their certificate of completion, or mail it to the PD coordinator in electronic form. And also we have the Connect communities, which are the online communities of practice, which is a great place and space for collaboration among our staff across the state. Through the PD portal, you can access active training, locate certificates of completion, browse and join those Connect communities, and search and register for training. And if you've been in the PD portal, there is the events calendar where you can see all of the live trainings, the face-to-face trainings that are coming up. and then of course the online curriculum. And we do have a complete library of kind of self-help videos that can be really, really helpful if you have someone who's kind of struggling to figure out how to do something in the portal. Katie, who I think is still online with us, Katie and Laura are our portal team, and they've done just a great job of putting together those videos for us. So your PD coordinator, depending on how your program is set up, you are going to have the capacity to have what we call a manager and approver in the PD portal. And that is someone at your local program that has the ability to look at transcripts, to pull reports, to assign training. For the most part, at the local program, that is usually the director and the PD coordinator. Now, you as the supervisor can make the determination on who's going to be in those roles, but it's super helpful if you have staff that you feel have a gap that you really want to assign them training. You can just go in and do it. You can pull a report so that you can see, okay, this person still needs 3 hours of PAL. This person has met all their PD requirements for the year. They're good to go. So being able to run those reports is super helpful for your PD coordinator or yourself as a supervisor. Oh, and the last bullet there is you can add external training. And if you don't know how to do that, your PD specialist that's assigned to your program would be more than happy to help you with that. But that way you can add something like if they went out and took a Links online course, you can add that certificate of completion to their transcript in the portal. So they have all of their stuff in one space. So when you go into the PD portal, these are some of the icons that you're going to see. So it's really helpful to kind of know what those mean. So if you go in and do a search, you're going to get a list of search results, and right before each of the search results, you're going to see one of these icons. So what that means is if you see a little stack of books, that's an online course. Okay, so that's an asynchronous course that's available within the portal. If you see a little calendar icon, that's something that's a face-to-face training. So there may or may not be an active event on the calendar, but it's also something, it gives you an indication that it's something you can request. So I go in and I see a session on multi-level instruction. And it says there's no current availability, but it's a little calendar icon. That means there's nothing on the calendar right now, but I can request it. So you can fill out that PD request form that we looked at just a few minutes ago and have somebody come and do that for your local program. And then if you see the little building with the 3 columns, that is a library. So a library is not necessarily something that you're going to be getting professional development credit for, but it's more a resource for you. So we have, for instance, a TWC Teams Technical Assistance Library. So those are not necessarily things you're going to get PD credit for, but resources. So if you need to go back and figure out how am I supposed to tag this in Teams, that we have a short video that the TWC staff has recorded for you that you can go back and reference. So there are a couple of ways to search for events in Teams, or excuse me, PD portal. I get them all. I'm in one or the other at any given time. So global search. So if you're in the PD portal, up in the right-hand corner, there's a search box. That's your global search. So you can put in keywords, and that will give you search results for both face-to-face and online trainings. And there's also an advanced search where you can refine it. So if you need to search for just things that have been designated as PAL, for instance, you can go to refine search and you can do that from there. And you can search from the events calendar. So you can look for things there. And again, we have some instructional PDFs that we've put together that go into a little more detail about search in the PD portal. So the Connect communities, which I mentioned just a little bit ago, are a great place to go and interact with and collaborate with colleagues, share ideas, ask questions. You know, if you've got this question, somebody else probably has that same question. So this is a great place to go and connect with them. And when you go into the PD portal, I think it's like along the top, I think it's the second or third, depending on how you're set up. You'll just hover there, and that's where you go to connect to the Connect communities. Some of the communities are open to everyone. Some of them are closed to a specific group. It just depends. But for instance, there's a one for, I think Anne-Marie is still here, that Anne-Marie monitors, which is the Adult Education and Literacy Instruction Group. We have one for content standards. We have one for assessment. So those are some of them are very active, and it's a great place to go ask questions and share resources. So once you get to the tab where you can see the communities and you click on one that you're interested in, you'll see a little blue bar that says join community. So that's all you got to do. You hit that button and you've become a participant in that particular community. So in the PowerPoint that we shared with you, there's a little bit more information about some other resources, a little outside of the professional development realm, that are available to you through our grant with the Texas Workforce Commission, including discussion lists that in some ways kind of line up with those communities of practice as far as topics go. We also have a provider directory where you can find a local program. And that's really helpful if you have a student that's leaving your program because they're moving. You can go into the provider directory and go ahead and get them the information of a local program where they're going, and you can have your student leave with that information in hand. And then also information about the TCAL library and the resources that we have available there. So I am done with my piece of the presentation. I don't know, Elena, if Elena's back. I don't think she is, but Blanca is going to be up next, is going to talk with us about some Teams stuff.
We're going to turn this over to Blanca. She's going to talk about Teams. So welcome, Blanca Saldivar. We'll get started.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Teams Basics. This is the last day of the new director's training. So I bet you all are so happy. And so let's just get this over with so we can get going with our lives. So as Tracy mentioned, I'm Blanca Saldivar, and I'm the person behind the team's technical support. I understand I need to have my camera on, so I apologize. I don't know how to work, doing both of these things. So if I look a little weird, excuse me. Anyway, so just get your coffee and let's just start to talk about Teams, okay? So the end of the agenda here we have for today, we're going to be going over the basic components of Teams. What is Teams, data types, navigating, and Teams data tracking. We will go over the understanding of operations and the type of roles and permissions. Here we will go over the Teams access support, an overview, access and requirements, and we'll cover all these aspects of the Teams systems here in the introduction. For our objective today, we want you to know how to navigate Teams, know the difference between access roles, be able to recall the order of operation, and know what assistance you can receive through Teams technical assistance. The Texas Educating Adults Management System was developed as a response to the National Reporting System, NRS. Teams is set up to document student attendance, academic progress, educational attainment, and work-related outcomes. How and when a student is assessed and what constitutes academic progress is determined by NRS. Here's more about Teams. Teams is the data management system for the federally funded adult education and literacy program in Texas. Access is limited to people who work for an adult education and literacy grant recipient and subrecipient. It is web-enabled system and maintains student-level data, including demographic, assessment, and outcome data, and class, site, program, and provider information. Users can analyze class, site, and program information by using standard reports generated at the user level. It provides a wide range of information about adult education, including snapshots of student and program performance, personal qualifications, and staff development activity. Here you see are the data types in Teams. As you see in the column on the left, it shows the real-time data. Real-time data is available as soon as data is entered or matched every 24 hours for assessment results, GED matches, staff development activities and hours, student profile and optional variables, HSE completions, plan gap, and exclusionary reasons. And on the right side, it states the follow-up data is available once a quarter and requires a match against the seed file record, which requires supporting document. Examples of documentation that would be needed to support what is entered in Teams are: for employment information, you would need a pay stub, verification letter, or printed email from the employer. For transition to post-secondary education or training, you would need a copy of their class registration receipts. And for credential MSG achievements, it's the HSC IET certification. Now we're going to be navigating Teams. Understanding how Teams environment is situated will also help you with understanding and remembering the data entry process necessary in Teams. The main menu in Teams can be found on the left-hand side of the screen, as you see here in blue. Each menu item with an arrow icon next to it will show the submenu when clicked on, as shown here on the right. Breadcrumbs appear across the top of the screen in the form of the blue hyperlink and can be used to easily navigate back to the previous screen in Teams. We recommend not using the back arrow because this may result in the loss of information or an error message. Clicking on the breadcrumbs, however, will help you to easily navigate to any of the previous screens. Now we're going to be getting information on tracking data. In Texas, grantees are required to track data in Teams. Data entry into Teams must occur at least biweekly, with no more than a two-week delay between actual activity and activities reports in Teams. All data must be validated monthly. Directors must also ensure that all staff have initial and ongoing training for Teams and follow the order of operation. Tracy, is everything okay out there? Because I seem to be going a little fast, so I'm just nervous.
I don't have any questions yet. You're doing fine.
Good. Awesome. Okay, we're going to keep going here. Over the order of operations, there's different types of data in Teams. It depends on other data that has been entered. So it's important to follow the order of operation so you don't find yourself stuck. For example, a provider can add multiple student participants in Teams, but they will not be able to add them to a class until both the site and instructor, which is the staff, have been entered as well. As you see here, we have the order of operation, which is the grant recipient, provider, site, staff, class, and student. For grant recipient, it's an entity that is a contract with the TWC to provide service directly or through providers or subrecipients. If a provider is part of a consortium, the grant recipient in Teams will be the entity within the consortium who has the contract with TWC. Everything exists within the grant recipient in Teams. Just so you know, the only way that the grant recipient can be entered in Teams is through the TWC employees only, staff. Adding or assigning a provider in the first sequence of the data entry for the order of operation, following the order in Teams will help to avoid sequencing errors that are built in the system. A provider is an entity that is providing student services. In Teams, there are 3 categories a provider can fall into, and they are the grant 1, the grant recipient, 2, the subcontractor, and 3, the collaborating organization. And here we have sites. A site is a location where a class is taking place. Sites are different than provider and are attached to a grant recipient. A provider must be first created and assigned before you can create a new site for that provider. And for staff details consist of the demographic data and contact information, employment details, qualifications, and staff development. Each staff member must have a staff record in Teams. Any grantee a staff member is attached to can see the staff member information. Staff records exist independent of grant recipients. Therefore, a staff record can be assigned to multiple grant recipients. And here we have the class. Before you can add a participant to a class, the class must be in the system. It is also important to enter the naming convention. When creating a class, it should be set up in a way that is reflective to the service which will be offered. This would allow you to record hours that correlate with the service to include either direct hours, proxy hours, and/or training hours. Entering direct hours will only be the default. However, entering proxy hours or training hours will require additional steps when setting up a class. For IETs, a training service must first be added, and then all IETs classes can be attached.
Okay, Blanca, we have a question. Jack
Okay.
asking, can you explain site a little bit more? If we are a single provider but have classes at different locations, do we need to list those as different sites?
Do they need to be attached to a class? Going to be in the sites?
So what I'm guessing is she has different sites at different locations that will have classes at those sites, like, you know,
Okay.
offsite at elementary school over in the west part of town, and maybe another church in the east part of town. And okay, yes, she's saying yes, and Maria's saying yes. You'll need the sites entered to attach the class to it. So the site comes first, and then
Correct.
the classes, correct?
Correct. So yes, it has to come first before you can attach it to a class.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that's the reason you first do the sites and then you do your staff and then you attach it to your class.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Now we're going to go into students. In the order of operations, after you have added your instructors to teams or updated their existing records, you can create your class. Classes and teams house all the instructions, student activities, and are attached to specific sites where the classes are held. These allow classes to tell us what type of activities grant recipients are conducting and who is instructing those activities, and provide the basics for our participant level reporting. Class document the following student activities. It does activity fund codes, instructional time, coursework, ESL, such as ESL, IETs, or work preparation. It also tells what distance learning models and curriculums are being used. Now we're going to get into roles and permission. The ability to do certain things within the system depends upon the level or type of access. Like many secure system, Teams has different levels of user access associated with it. Access to the Teams system is granted based on the assignment of a particular role. Each role has certain privileges and parameters associated with it. Something to remember is privileges are things you can do, and parameters are defined where you can do them.
Okay, I have another question for you. For staff, from Tara, for staff qualifications, are we required to enter the qualifications they have put on their application to HR, or the qualifications required for their primary job? For example, if an instructional aide has a bachelor's degree, do we enter the bachelor's degree or high school diploma? Good question, Tara. Do you want me to read that again, or do? So,
Read it again.
okay,
Yeah.
so she's asking if someone is going to be an instructional aide, but they have a bachelor's degree, do you enter the bachelor's degree or the high school diploma? Do you enter?
I would say enter the bachelor's degree. I mean, it's better to put that, because has higher, priority over the diploma.
Right. Good answer. That's what Maria said too. Sorry.
Okay.
That you would enter the highest qualification, which is the bachelor's degree. Good question.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Tara. Moving on. Okay. So Teams has different privileges and parameters of users access depending on the access role. Some of these roles allow the users to write and read data, while others are only allowed to read data. The type of access an individual has in Teams and their actual job function in the system are not necessarily the same. Like, for example, a program director may assign designated director access to one of their staff because this individual does most of the work in Teams. However, just because an individual has been granted this type of access does not mean that their assigned job function has been changed to a director. So they're not a director, or sort of like, just using the director access to enter information in Teams. And as we see here, as mentioned in the previous slide, here is an example of what you might look like as a staff who has reader access. The staff position or title versus the staff user access on the left. On the left side, you will see that Minnie Mouse, she has an employment detail and her job title is a supervisor. And on the right here, her user access in Teams is a reader access, but still has her job title here as a supervisor and with the grant recipient, Texas South grant recipient. So just want to let you know there's a difference between your actual job title and the type of access you could have in Teams. Now we're going to go into the read, write roles. So as a director is the highest level you can do everything a supervisor can do: create, assign providers, and complete data validations and data sign-offs for grant recipients. The supervisor does everything a data entry role can do. It creates sites and completes validation of classes. However, director approval is still needed. You can be restricted to specific sites. Data entry, those are responsible for entering class participant and staff level data. They can add, modify, or delete class and participation level information. The reader, those responsible for viewing all the data throughout the entire grant recipient, but won't be entering data or adding information in the system. And site reader are for those who access needs to be restricted to view specific sites within the grant recipient and will not be able to add information into the system. And the staff reader is restricted access only for those classes that are actually assigned to them. Now we're going to go into Teams access. Here you'll see that our email box, which is teams.technicalassistance@twc.state.tx.us. And here we'll be going over what the technical assistance support provides. We provide actually support to you guys. We give you access to Teams, reset password, revoke access. We track Teams user access, the Teams tracker. We grant and approve PD staff qualifications and or exemptions. We grant and track the class invalidations and DSOs, and we add funding codes. And we also work with IT workforce automation team for Teams enhancements and system fixes. So for each row is the different in terms of access and who gets access. As you see here, the director, the role is limited to the director of the consortium or sole provider. The supervisor role is for the supervisory staff or the consortium member director. The data entry staff role is for any staff member doing data entry. And the reader row is for the reader who will need access to view the grant recipient information. The site reader row is for the reader who will view data for a site or group of sites. And the staff is the teacher reader row and for instructors who will view data for their assigned classes. And here you'll see other types of staff rows. As we mentioned before, Beth had mentioned about PD coordinators. If you want a PD coordinator to enter PD information, they need to have the supervisor row. So the supervisor row needs to be assigned in order to enter PD for staff. For career navigators, typically have reader row to view participant data for the entire grant team. And for instructors, volunteers, tutors, instructional aides, distant learning coordinators, they should have staff reader roles so they can view participant data and run reports assigned. And here is a useful tool you can use as a desk aid, which gives you a description of what the access is for each row. So I just recommend you printing this out and using this whenever you're deciding what type of access row to assign to one of your staff. Now we're going into access to Teams system, and it has an order of operational and approval process. First, the program staff initiates access. Second, the grant recipient director or assignee approves row access. And third, Teams TA verifies requirements and grants access. You can find the Teams access to the requirements under the AEL website, the TWC, under admin tools and forms. You can get direct link to the Teams instructions, DocuSign P41C, the SoftChalk training, which is the FERPA and cybersecurity awareness, and how to set up a user ID. As you see here to the right, for new users, in order to get access to Teams, they need to submit the P41C, the FERPA, cybersecurity, and they need to set up a user ID. And for existing users, they need to renew this on an annual basis. They need to submit a P41C and the cybersecurity. As listed here in the AEL letter 0218 change 1, the purpose of the letter is to provide AEL grantees with updated information and guidance on TWC access requirements for access and yearly renewal notification procedures and removal of access. All grantees must notify TWC via the Teams technical assistance email within 24 hours when an employee is no longer with the program, so that we can remove access in Teams. All grantees must be aware that an individual who does not access Teams for 90 days will have their access revoked and must complete a prerequisite requirement to regain access to the system. So that just means that if they're not using Teams within 90 days, then we go in there and we revoke their access. And if that happens, they'll have to, submit a new P41C, the FERPA and cybersecurity, and they'll have to go back and set up their account. So as we see here, this is how we're tracking the Teams access. So for each grantee is responsible for tracking access for those who have access and the type of access in Teams. For instance, in this tracker, for example, we have the Texas South grantee provider, and Buzz Lightyear is the director, and the program specialist is Snow White. And the staff member, Jiminy Cricket, is lacking both the P41C and the cyber and is locked in Teams. As you can see here, there's a red no for program year 1920 for the cyber and the P41C. So that means that Jiminy Cricket's locked. So if he stays locked for 90 days, we're going to revoke his access. Then he'll have to start the process all over again. And so you see here for staff member, Donald Duck is missing his cybersecurity training. So he may, as you see here, he may have already completed it, but he just hasn't sent it to Teams TA. We need to receive the cybersecurity, either the certificate or the score receipt in our Teams TA mailbox so that we can go in here and track it and put it in our system, so that he won't get locked in this system. And as you see here, Winnie the Pooh, you probably can't see it because it's not showing here, but he is revoked because, and he is inactive, as you see here under the status, because he is no longer with the program. So he was asked to remove him from the system. So all grantees have been given this tracker, and Teams TA is tracking up to 5,000 plus members. So there's a bunch of reports here of the different grantees, all 37 providers that we keep track of. So it's a lot of work. So just want to let you know, if you could just help you keep track of this, it'd be wonderful. Now we're going to go into staff qualifications and professional development. It's just a brief overview of the role. So staff qualification and staff development, also called staff development or PD, are required for AEL grantees and provider staff. And you can find this information in our TWC website for the rule chapter 805, Adult Educational Literacy. All staff are required for the 15 hours of PD, unless they start after January, then they require the 7.5 hours for the program. Staff will need to meet qualifications for the position, and they are updated each year in Teams. Staff that have at least 18 hours of college level credit in specific content area can waive the 6 hours in the relevant area of literacy instruction. This is outlined in the 805 rule. Teams will not allow you to add employment for an individual if they do not meet the minimum qualification PD requirements, nor will it allow you to assign employment to an individual who does not meet the minimum qualifications requirement. So a staff exemption request for minimum qualification can be submitted and approved via the AEL staff exemption form. And this form, as you see here, it is a hyperlink in this presentation, and it takes you to a DocuSign staff exemption form. And it is located in the TWC AEL webpage. And steps to do that are listed here on this slide, and the staff exemption form is the links. Now we're going to data validations, invalidations, and data sign-off. Data is validated monthly by the 15th of the previous month. Request for data invalidations is sent to Teams TA with class descriptions and justification for requests. Sign-off is due each program year, quarterly by the 15th. Directors or supervisor verifies or approves class validations, and the director verifies and approves DSOs. Validations is verified by TWC program specialists or Teams TA.
Okay, we do have a question, and this is Anna. It's a good question. So she sent it to me. I put it in the chat. Our program faces challenges getting teachers to look up their students and teams and keep track of them for post-testing and attendance, et cetera. Any tips? She's new, so she's full of questions, and that's a good question.
So she wants to know how to track what again?
Well, how to get teachers motivated to track their own students and teams. You know, you give them the access, but getting them to actually get in there and look at their classes and their post-testing hours and attendance, that kind of thing is challenging, she's saying.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if anyone else has an answer to that, how to get them to, you know.
So, okay, if anyone has any thoughts on that, please share in the chat. That's a good question. Then Tara, does Teams accept 3 PD hours for staff whose requirements are only 3 hours, or does it still have the glitch of requiring 15 PD hours?
Now, if whoever is the staff has to enter, you know, data for participants or for staff, they do need to have 15 hours. But anyone like, let's say the admin or somebody, they just need the 3 hours of PD. And I believe Beth went over some of that stuff.
Right. Teams, one of those things, and Teams has not been updated to reflect the new staff qualification rules that were passed a few years ago. So Teams is like an old setup frame, if you will, for PD. So it is confusing. Hopefully that will someday be fixed, right?
Right. We did go in there and fix the 7.5 hours, where now it does catch it. If it's, you know, if they met that qualification, it should go through the system now. That's when they start after January. But I'm not too sure what you mean when it's not fixed when it comes to PD. Because
it's old. It is old. Where it used to be, there was 12 hours required and pre-services in there. So, you know, people are wanting it to track PAL and literacy and all of
the individual ones, correct. Yeah, it's just doing the total hours at this time.
Okay, so we have another question. Jody's asking, do I need to let you know to close the class after I've asked for it to be reopened? And this is about validation, or do you automatically close it? If so, how long does it stay open?
Okay, so your supervisor or the director is supposed to be going in there and validating your classes, and they're the ones that put in there and they close it. And so let's say if you need to go in there and update it, you need to send us Teams TA an email with the class information and your reason for opening up the class to go in and, you know, if you need to go in and make changes or information was entered incorrectly.
Right. So her question is, does she need to let y'all know when she's fixed it, or do you automatically close it?
No, we don't automatically close it. The supervisor is supposed to be doing that in your grant area.
Oh, okay. So if she's asked you to reopen it, to fix something or change something, does she then redo the data validation on that class?
So if she needs to go in and do edits to the class or to the contact hours or something,
right?
Just send Teams TA an email with the description and a reason why you want to open the class to make changes.
Right. Okay. So when she's made the changes, think that's her question. After she's
Okay,
asked
they
it
need
to
to
be open.
contact their supervisors to go in there to close it.
Okay, so the supervisor
Validate it.
closes it because Jody's,
That's
I
right.
think, at the supervisor level. So she would close it after you've reopened it.
Correct. Anyone that has supervisor access. will
Okay.
close it. And then the director goes behind them and approves it.
Okay, okay. So does
Access.
that answer, Jody says, thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. I didn't get the last part.
Okay, and then Maria she was asking for an AEL letter regarding data validation, and Maria put that information in the chat as well. Okay, so I think we have another question. Abel's asking, so for the purpose of compliance, in reference to Tara's question, which PD hour requirement would we be accountable for? And I think Tara's question was about like the 3 hours for, say, admin or entry persons, which PD hour requirement would we be accountable for? Are you asking for data entry staff for the 3 hours?
Yes, and I believe Beth put up a chart on that explaining how many hours that the data entry should have, and I believe it's the 3 hours.
Right. Okay. Does that answer your question, Abel?
Tracy, may I intervene here a little bit?
Absolutely.
Sure.
Since Teams is not updated, like you mentioned, so are we going to be accountable to what Teams is currently showing or the updated PD requirements? So if Teams is still saying that we need to have 15 hours for certain staff, but the actual PD requirement says 3, which one are we held accountable for?
So it just depends on the staff. So if your admin needs 3 hours, then as long as it's showing in her staff employment detail that she has the 3 hours, she'd be fine. And Teams should be catching that. Are you saying that it's not catching it?
Well, and Abel, you may want to answer that. I know Tara's saying in Teams, it doesn't let us keep them active in the new program year if they don't have the 15 hours. And she's saying no. So Abel, do you agree with that?
Right. So Teams will show that that staff didn't meet the qualifications because they didn't have the 15 hours. And that's like you mentioned, that's due to a glitch in Teams that hasn't been updated yet. So how do we go, what's the work around that? Because the actual requirement is not 15 anymore, it's just 3. And
Right.
they've hit that.
So then you would go ahead and put in a staff exemption form and request we go in there and process a staff exemption for that staff, and then it'll push it through. But let me look into that for the 3 hours, because I could swear that, the system should be working now in regards to the 3 hours. So let me look into that, because I haven't heard of that one. I've had heard of the 7.5 hours for the staff that, like I said, that are starting after January. If they don't have the 7.5 hours, or even for staff that should have the 15 hours that are instructors and stuff, if they don't have their hours complete in Teams, and it doesn't let them go in there and update their employment status for the next year. So what has to be done is an exemption has to be submitted, and so that we can push it through. So I'm sorry, who was Abel? Was that you that I was talking to? And Tara?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me look into that, and I'll get back with you guys to find out what's going on. Okay, I'll give you just an explanation, and I'll send you the link to the exemption form.
Okay, and we did put the link to the exemption form in the chat. It's in there a couple of times. Beth found it, and then I put it in there again, so it is in there if they need to pull that. But thank you. Okay.
Any more questions?
Not at this moment.
Okay, we're moving on now to funding codes. Okay, so grant director will need to send Teams TA a request to add funding codes to Teams. You can see the reference guide and policy guidance in the AEL letter 0221 attachment 3 funding codes. Now we're going into Teams enhancements. Teams enhancements and updates requirements are aligned with the WIOA rule and with TWC information security guidelines and regulations. You will find Teams release information updates in the admin memo in Teams homepage, and the Teams release notes are provided via the Teams TWC transmittal. You can send Teams TA your wish list. We encourage grantees to provide system feedback and suggestions to best meet your needs. Here, as you see, the admin memo in the welcome homepage that gives you a brief update of the Teams enhancement and information on when Teams is down. As you see here, Teams will have a new release on 5/7, which will come out on June 30th. And we will update the employment detail, and we also will modify staff roster, and we'll modify the MSG report. So be looking out for that. Now let's get into Teams. Next, we are going to do a brief overview of Teams system. The best way to become familiar with Teams is by getting straight into it. In the home page, you can identify your access at the top right corner. As you see here, Minnie Mouse has reader access. You can also go into My Profile, which is here on the right, and update personal information. You can view membership status, and you can change your password is in there as well. And these are the reports that are the most up to date with the period of participation. The most important ones are the participant, POP, and MSG reports. There are many reports that are ready to view in the searching area and selecting your search report. For director row level access, they can only view the admin section. A few items to access: they can access the data sign off, the distance learning curriculum, funding source, staff exemptions, and the text chase non-match. And there's more that you can do in there. When you go into the funding source options, there will be a long list of options available. Now I'm talking about grant recipients. So now we're going to go into the grant recipient report. As you see here, they're able to update their program year. They can see what type of funding source they have, and TWC and director access level can edit this section. Here, always search the statewide list of providers before adding a new provider in the system. A single provider can serve multiple grant recipients. Therefore, there's information in-house in a list so that all grant recipients can select providers. Only staff with director level access can add a provider in Teams. To assign provider to grant recipient, once you know a provider is active, you can assign provider to a grant recipient. Next, we're going to go over the sites. Each grant recipient is responsible for creating its own site. A site must be attached to the provider. That is why you must add or assign all providers to grant recipient prior to adding sites. Sites do not exist in the state list of providers. Classes are assigned to a site. And here we go into team staff. The first thing we remember is when you are looking to place people in teams, you have to search for them first, as many already exist within the system. It is imperative that we do not duplicate people in teams. You should always know if staff has been inactive for a while or with another grant recipient, you will be able to update their information. Once staff is active, they will remain active until end date is placed on their profile. The end date must correspond to the staff's actual last date of employment with grant recipient. If they are not leaving the program, then they will remain active. Now again into staff development. Here,
I'm sorry, I have a question about the other slide. Lavana's asking, at what point do participants become active in teams?
So what point do they become active in teams?
Participants,
For their staff profile. So it just depends if he's talking about actually active in staff under the recipient or active as a user with teams. So it just depends what kind of access he's talking about.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Lavana? Yes, she says yes. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Do we go over classes? I don't remember. I don't think.
No, I think you were about to start that and then I stopped you. I'm sorry, but no.
Thank you. No, this is new for me, so I apologize. I get sort of. So classes are housed in the instructional framework of the, classes house the instructional framework of the class and tells us what activities the student is participating in, how many hours they have accumulated, and what type of coursework they are doing. Non-NRS classes were set up for students that took a non-approved NRS test, so they could be entered into teams. These students are not being counted towards performance until scores from an approved NRS test are entered into Teams. Once that has happened, they should be moved to a regular class with other students that have been tested with an approved NRS test. The easiest way to find a class is by searching by the class number. Next, we're going to talk about training services. Training services needs to be set up for all IETs. Training services are different from training classes. There are two separate things. Discuss with your program specialist how to set up training services and for more details. Teams participants. Always search first. You will need 3 criteria, as I think you guys already know. Also, you can use the participant ID, social security number, driver's license, ID, document ID number, and document ID number. Participants can go between different providers. Participants must have a baseline prior to being enrolled into class and must have a complete record and profile in Teams. An individual will not become a participant until they get the 12 hours.
Okay, and I've a question that was.
Any questions? There we go.
Oh, there's many else. How cute. Okay, so, and you mentioned this earlier, but to clarify, who do we notify if a class needs to be invalidated? And you did mention that, but it's a good question to repeat the answer to.
Okay, so in order to invalidate class, your request needs to go to Teams Technical Assistance.
Teams Technical Assistance, okay.
Now, I might want to mention that there could be, like if you're with the HGAC, Taylor Creel is the one that contacts us through Teams, and they're the only ones that prefer to go through us. So if you're with HGAC, please get with Taylor Creel to request your invalidations. And I believe that's the main one, but everyone else, you can go through your AEL director as well and ask them who to, if they want to send it to them first, or if they want, it's okay, and straight to Teams TA. But we will definitely, sponsor you once you send it to Teams TA. And of course, like I said, you need to send a description of your class, which is the class name and number, and then provide us with the reason why you need us to open it up. Any more questions?
Okay, that's all the questions right now.
I think we're done for the day. And it's our pleasure to you, and thank you. And like I said, get with your program specialist for more details. I did go through this pretty fast. I apologize. And I am going to get back to you, some of you guys, about the questions you have, especially when it comes to the 3 hours for the admin that is not showing up in Teams. So again, I'll let you know what's the response to that, and I'll put it in. I'll send it to you guys. But thank you. And have a good day, everybody.
Okay, do y'all have any other questions? Thanks.
Thank you so much, Tracy. You're so welcome. You're so welcome as well. Have a good day.
All right. And thank you, Beth. And y'all have a great rest of the day and rest of the week. Okay.